Welcome back to Wood, everyone. How are you? Good. Did everyone get some of the food truck fare today? Yes. Was it good? Yeah. Okay. We expect feedback, so let us know. All right. Test 1. Can you hear me now? Are we on? Test. Okay. We're going to go ahead and get started. We are already a little behind and need to make up some time. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you today Dr. Brian Williamson, who is a partner with Giant Worldwide and is sought after by leaders of all levels, traveling nationally and internationally, consulting and communicating in a way that contributes to the increased health and performance of teams. He has a proven track record of helping individuals and teams increase their leadership skills, emotional intelligence, and self-awareness, resulting in a greater capacity, satisfaction, and effectiveness. He has 20 plus years of leadership experience, including roles as a founder, a senior director, as well as 4 years active duty as a U.S. Marine. His unique research in the field of positive organizational scholarship will be released next year in his book, Norm-Defying Leadership, Science and Stories from Today's Top Performers. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to the Wood stage, Dr. Williamson.
Thanks very much. I've been wanting to thank you for so long. When I was stationed in Okinawa, we used to hop on our bikes and drive over to Kadena, and it was the first time I had Popeye's chicken. So red beans and rice. I grew up in New Jersey, never had that southern fare. So thank you not only for flying us, but for the luxuries of Kadena. So I really appreciate you. All right, so my intention during our time is that 3 things get accomplished here. 1, I'm going to introduce you briefly to the field of positive organizational scholarship. There's a lot to be gleaned there. 2nd, I'm going to inspire you with an overview of my research findings. And 3rd, I'm going to challenge you to grapple with personal and contextual applications for you. All right, so let me introduce you a little bit to the field of positive organizational scholarship. A friend and I my business partner, were actually recently hired by a company to look at what are the factors impacting attrition in the 2-year and under population. So why is it that people that were there 2 years and under are taking off and saying peace out so quickly? And so you might not be surprised to find out that actually, like the research says, about 70% of the workforce is disengaged and 51% of the management workforce is disengaged. And so we hypothesized that it was the supervisor-employee relationship that was contributing to this 2-year and under leak. And sure enough, that was the case. And so we did an extensive research write-up, and I sat last month with 5 of the supervisors, and I handed them the results. And I had them read through the page after page, the line after indicting line, really saying this, that they had very, very low relational management skills, very low emotional intelligence. The employees were complaining about very, very simple things. They were complaining about just a lack of common courtesy, a lack of respect, inability to access their supervisor during the whole 12-hour shift that they were present. And so I framed my first question very, very carefully, and I said to them, imagine if this was a report about managers in another location. I said, imagine this isn't about you at all. I said, what do you see here? What is it that you would coach? What would you say to the people receiving this report? And the guy that was the first responder jumped in, and this is what he said. He said, Brian, I think that the results would be the same no matter where you went. I think if you gave this survey in any workplace, it would be the same. And so I said to him, using my mad active listening skills, which are very intentional, not natural to me, I said, okay, so it sounds like what you're saying is that a healthy, thriving workplace culture doesn't exist. And he said, it does, but it is the exception. Now, I don't even fish. I'm from Jersey. And that's what you call hook, line, and sinker. And I locked eyes with him, and I pulled him in, and I said this. I said, why don't you, over the next year, commit with me to becoming the exception? Why don't you commit to actually breaking free from this transactional mindset that keeps you locked in compliance and low morale and all the things that you're experiencing, and take a look with me at life from the right end of the bell curve. Why don't you look at life with me from the positive deviance end of the bell curve? So I just put two words together that you're not used to hearing. Positive deviance. It's sort of like giant ant, or Microsoft Works, or partial ceasefire. Okay, they're words that you don't actually hear together quite a bit. But this is what we study inside of the field of positive organizational scholarship. We look at what is it that enables exceptional, outlier, positively deviant performance. We look at what causes flourishing, what's life-giving inside organizations and teams. And it's ironic for me that I chose this as a field of study, because I'm sort of the last, I'm very critical, I'm the least likely to be like shiny, happy people holding hands kind of person. But I actually found that we're talking about positive in terms of exceptional performance, and we're talking about positive in terms of what does it take to see people flourish and thrive and not just live status quo. Another way to think about this is this is a couple of our little friends here. Okay, I live in Lansing, Michigan, wife, 4 kids. My wife has this really bad habit of 3 times a year, we get dressed up and we go to JCPenney and we're all in the same pajamas. I do the walk of shame, and we got all our family looking like, you know, this tribe of crazy pajama people. And we added the dogs to the mix, and she's gone plumb mad, okay? So Louie and Lilo, I mean, you put an M60 in my hands, I'm a devil dog, but you put a pug in my lap, and I'm all different, right? So she gets Louie and Lilo, and here's what happens. She has Facebooked away tons of these pictures. And like last week, somebody said to us, how in the world do you get your dogs to stay so still? Now, I was like, really? Somebody's going to ask that question? It's called a treat, you know? Sit, Lilo, sit, Louie, and stay, right? And then it dawned on me, what we do inside positive organizational scholarship, and here's why we do it, is there's so much research about what we call deficit gaps. There's so much research about things that are going bad or things that are wrong. In fact, some people think as much as 99% of psychological research, as high as 90% of health research is about the negative side of the continuum. There's an illness, there's something wrong, let's get it to health, right? So it's that side of the continuum. Very little has been done on what's the right side of what we call an abundance gap. What causes these exceptional behaviors? You can see a list here in different categories, right? What is it that really is that, not just bad dog, let me hit you with a switch, or good dog, have a treat, but what is it to do the exceptional outlier type behaviors? And looking at deviance along a continuum like this really frames up what we're after here. So we have no issue with looking at the negative and the challenges, but we want to be expansive and not limiting in what we're looking at. So why we want to look at this is actually, I'm going to tell you 2 things. First of all, listen carefully. If you lick the lollipop of mediocrity, you'll suck forever. It's profound. That's tweetable right there. Now, really simply, like, who doesn't want to go to the right of the bell curve, right? Who doesn't want to perform exceptionally? And there's a whole field of 20-plus years of research that says, hey, if you want to increase things like mental acuity, innovation, satisfaction, you know, it's taking a look at that side of the curve. So we want to be exceptional. It actually unleashes something called the heliotropic effect when we look at life from the right side of the bell curve. And that is, if you put a plant in a window, it gravitates toward the light. And this is why positive energy is so powerful, and looking at life from the right of the bell curve is so important. And second, I know there's a lot of talk about the VUCA world. I'm probably a little bit more concerned with the TGIF world, which is Twitter, Google, iPhone, Facebook, right? Right? Technology has sped up so much, and one thing in our world that actually hasn't sped up, there's been massive, right, technological advances. If you think even in pharma, it used to take about 10 years to reproduce a medicine that came out on the market. Now it takes like an hour, right? So much has changed. But what hasn't changed is the time that it takes for a team to become a high-performing team. And so anything we can look at when we think about that right of the bell curve to learn from outlier leaders, what is it that they do so well in terms of the people side, is really, really important. So now I want to share with you some of my research findings and tell you a little bit about what I did, the work I did, and how I think it can benefit you. So when I was in 5th grade, I got this guy here. Anybody remember Stretch Armstrong? This will be another way to tell the millennials and the centennials, right? Okay, I got Stretch Armstrong. This guy was the cat's pajamas. I love this thing. Well, he lasted about 2 months in my house. Because what happened, some of you did this, didn't you? I took an X-Acto knife and I slayed him, sliced him right down the middle, right? And out of the middle of Stretch Armstrong, I have zero regrets, out of the middle came this red corn syrup liquid stuff, and it was incredible, right? And I love that. I love the idea of, let me gut something. Like, I guess, even though I didn't hunt growing up, and maybe that was the issue until I was in the Marine Corps, no. But I wanted to gut something and see it pop out. So here's the thing. When I decided to pick my research, I wanted to gut positively deviant leaders. What is the inside story in leaders that allows them to go above and beyond normal performance? So the definition of positive deviance when we talk about leadership is this. It's uncommon behavior that does not conform to expected norms, but it would actually be deemed positive by a referent group of followers. So what I did was I looked at a group of these leaders. Now, what's really interesting about this is I didn't just look at leaders, because actually there was some research done about 20,000 plus executives, and what they found was that 70% of them thought they were in the top 10%, right? Hashtag blind spots, right? So what I wanted to find out was also, what did the followers perceive in these particular leaders that caused them to be these amazing positively deviant leaders? Let me give you a quick rundown of these leaders. So I interviewed 2 presidents. One of them was recognized by Inc. magazine as one of the fastest growing privately held companies. They've grown by 133% consistently over the last 3 years. Absolutely incredible performance. One was the president of a $4 billion manufacturing company who, when I shared this topic with one of his senior leaders, they said, that is totally him. He's a positive rule breaker. He's a norm-defying leader. One was a serial entrepreneur. One was an Air Force general, and I think you'll resonate with some of what I share there. In addition to a myriad of other things, he told me the story of how he sort of flexed some airspace rules and some refueling regulations to save 12 Marines in the Kunar Valley. And amazing just to tap his heart and really gut him and see what were the things that, from his vantage point, enabled this exceptional performance. I looked at a restaurant owner. Now, this was fascinating. I saw a story on CNN News, and it caught my attention, and right away I thought, this is absolutely a positively deviant leader. Her profits are 4 times higher than other successful restaurants in San Francisco. Her dishwasher, Miguel, has been there for 26 years, and she's got this really interesting statement on her menu. They've since taken it off and just included it into the cost of other items. But if you read this little snippet here, it says the $1.25 per person surcharge added to all checks provides full benefits for our hard-working staff. The extra charge provides 32 employees of the San Francisco French Bistro with full health and dental insurance and paid sick leave. No employee is exempt, even those who work only 1 day a week. It was really amazing. And as I listened to her, her name was Jen, I listened to her talk, and she would tell me about going to the Golden Gate Restaurant Association, and she would tell her story about how it was that she was getting these exceptional results. And it rocks my mind. But guess what? People wouldn't do it, right? She's this outlier restaurant with amazing retention that'll rock your mind. I mean, again, you got a waiting list to get in there, right? The way she takes care of her people, we're going to see some of it in just a minute. People wouldn't do it. They were locked in their conventional mindset. So let me give you a little bit of an initial snapshot of when I asked the followers of these leaders. First I asked them, I said, do you think your leader is a positively deviant leader? And they all said yes. And I said, well, why is that the case? What is it that stands out to you about these particular leaders? And so here's what they said. I'm going to read through just a few of the notes here. The first one said this: it was the ability to let you lead. A lot of leaders in those positions try to micromanage and don't allow for failure in different aspects. And to be able to speak into that, the challenge that what you did yesterday isn't good enough for today either. The expectation that you have to build into other leaders and you don't get to just sit and soak it all up. You have to push it into others. So I don't think that's a typical approach by leaders in the world. Here's the next one. One of the best things about Jason is he does have a different way of thinking about things that goes outside the norm. I have seen in him, it's almost like a generosity for customers, or even if, let's say, the customer is not paying the bills and contractually we have the right to go back and not pay for the repair on a piece of equipment, we would still go make the repair for them and would risk losing a significant amount of money in the hopes that this is a sign we can rebuild the relationship and have it long term. Here's the next one. To start with, probably she from the beginning has really focused on putting the team aspect above most things. So she centered around the team to build a strong team that would then care for her patients rather than put the patients first. So it's kind of like a backwards way of putting patients first. So put us first, strengthen us so that we can better care for her patients so that it doesn't just, not just a top-down model, and she doesn't get to make all the decisions. She builds us up and strengthens us up to help make decisions. And here's the next follower of the same particular person. Well, the first thing I'd say is that she's not top-down. She does not have a top-down management style. Her management style is more of a shared leadership style. And you don't see that in a lot of organizations. She doesn't like to call herself boss. She kind of hates that word. And she has like a shared leadership amongst her practice. So I really think that sets her apart and pushes her above. So let me just say one thing, just about those initial follower descriptions. You remember the 80s song, I Always Feel Like Somebody's Watching Me? You remember that? Don't make me sing it. All right. Thank you. It was really fascinating to me listening to the followers of these leaders because they could describe with great accuracy, very, very similar to General Quast's first principle there, almost to a scary amount of detail, the attitudes, the behaviors, these things about their leader. I mean, they are very, very tuned in. Those in your charge are very tuned into how you're living. And so I like to ask people, what's it like to be on the other side of you? How do people experience you? And getting that type of information is incredibly valuable for you. So as I gutted these leaders, we're going to look at 3 different areas. We're going to look at values, behaviors, and attitudes. So what were the motivators of this positively deviant behaviors and leaders, positively deviant leadership? What, when we gutted them, what did we find? So the first area we're going to look at is values, okay? And here's a simple list. These are simply the values from the leader perspective and the values from the follower perspective. So first of all, prioritization and care for others was the dominant, weightiest factor that we found. This will definitely feel like we are beating a dead horse in this conference if I spend time talking to you about this, right? Others first. People, when they meet you, are saying, are you for me, against me, or for yourself? Positively deviant leaders, these norm-defying leaders, were for others. They were marked by fighting for the highest possible good in the lives of those they led. They were values-driven. One of them said this: when values are clear, decisions are easy. Isn't that good? So some of you that struggle with indecisiveness, I'm a person, I love to keep my options open and let it hang for a real while. And actually, it dawned on me that values are a way to expedite decisions when you're working in a team, isn't it? And so this idea that values were very, very protective and guarding for these particular leaders was important both from the leader and the follower perspective. They had a growth and reproduction mindset. We're going to talk in more detail in just a minute about that. But they were continual learners, and they really had this desire to push things down, not only to the person in front of them, but to the 3rd and 4th generation right out of the gate. I thought that was fascinating, that they weren't even just thinking about who is this person in front of me and how can I develop them. They were thinking, how can I help this person develop the person that's underneath them? Really powerful. They had a sense of meaning, whether this was religious faith or yoga or early life experiences like General Quast talked about earlier as well. Those things really marked these particular leaders. All of them had a sense of calling about what they were doing. There were things in their lives that marked them that they could anchor back to, and they were anchoring to a greater purpose. They were marked by courageous action. All of them ran toward conflict. It was actually interesting. Some of them would say, boy, it's really energizing for me to run towards conflict. And others of them would say, boy, I feel really vulnerable, but I still run towards conflict. Right? That was a mark of a value of this particular leaders. They had a shared approach to leadership, very obvious. They were actually very collaborative and pushing things down. And this last one I want to comment on. So from the leader's perspective, they saw that one of the keys to their effectiveness was their own emotional intelligence. And there's a lot of research on emotional intelligence. We won't spend a lot of time there, but it certainly was something that they actually understanding their own emotional state, knowing how to connect with the people in front of them, understanding different personalities was very important for the leader as a driver of their behavior. Now, from the follower perspective, they called out integrity in these leaders. And I thought it was actually really important to notice that the leader didn't actually say that integrity was a value. Now notice, I didn't say that they didn't value integrity, but they actually didn't themselves say that that was a value. And I got to thinking about this a little bit, and it reminded me of a gentleman when I took a senior director role. My first week on the job, a guy pulled me aside, and he gave me the arm around the shoulder, and he said, "Hey, Brian, if you ever need somebody to talk to, you can talk to me." Right? And for me, it was like, run, Forrest, run. Right? The person that has to come up to me and say, "Hey, you can trust me. I'm a person you can trust," is like, probably not. Like my little Quast meter was going off in terms of my discernment. It was like epic fail down there. Right? So it's probably best to demonstrate integrity and not declare integrity. Right? I thought it was actually interesting there from the perspective of the leaders. So those are values. What about behaviors? How did these leaders behave? Okay? Now, this is actually maybe not going to shock you, but the lists look very similar, right? And so that prioritization and care of others that they said they valued played out in a connection and care for other people, right? Now, I'll talk about that in a second. You go down the list, I won't spend a lot of time. They said growth and reproduction mindset. That played out in how they behaved in terms of the way they interacted with people. From the follower's perspective, commenting on the behavior of the leader, the follower said that leader is learning all the time. There's always some fresh popcorn spewing out of their head about something that they're learning, about something that's actually intriguing them, right? So from the follower perspective, they noticed that growth orientation of the leader. Emotional intelligence plays out here on both sides. So in the behaviors of the leader, the followers said, boy, they really understand how to connect with me well. They understand what motivates me, what's important to me, and they could do that well. The leaders credited creativity a ton, and we'll go into detail in a minute. And the followers actually called out communication and modeling of vision. So let me hit pause now and make a few comments just on the values and behaviors categories of these particular leaders. First of all, there are practiced values and preferred values, right? So there are things that we say that we value. So we might say, I value physical fitness, and if I don't go to the gym in a month, I probably prefer to value. It's a preferred value. I mean, I would like to do that aspirationally, but I'm not practicing that, right? So positively deviant, norm-defying leaders were very consistent in the values and the behavior sets that were playing out. They were practicing what they preached. They lived integrated lives. There was a congruence between what the leader said he or she valued and what they did. Now, again, for average and low performers, I mean, this is a little bit of a 360 that I did here, right? So I look at average leaders and low-performing leaders. What they say they value and how they behave are not always the same, right? There can be a distinction there. So they actually lived that out. Secondly, when you saw that they valued the prioritization and care of their followers, they actually behaved in a way where they spent time connecting with their people. Now, I fully understand. It used to be that the Harley Davidson was the kind of the American dream. Get out on the highway, do that whole Harley thing. And now somebody said it's sort of like the tire spin is our mantra. It's like life at the speed of blur. So actually taking the time to slow down, to be present with people and give them what's necessary for their development, which is proximity and frequency, it's a gift. And it's a very important gift that these leaders gave to their people. They made sure that they were in proximity and had frequency of connection with their followers. I mean, real simple stuff. I thought I had that up there. Real simple things. I'll read real quick here. So one of the ladies said this, the leader. She said, when I arrive to work, I never go straight to the office. I come in, I say hello to everybody individually. I ask about their kids. I ask about their brothers. I know each of them by name, what their life situations are. And if someone's home sick, I'll text them and check on them. I've sent flowers to my employees. If they've been in the hospital, if they've had new kids, I get them gifts. So she said, I just sort of had an awareness of them as people, not just employees. And so what does it look like for you as you launch into 2018 to actually go, how can I provide proximity and frequency to my followers in a transformational way? Finally, here's my last thought, just on the whole values and behaviors categories. Talking about vision from a stage is overrated. I thought it was really interesting that the leaders didn't credit their visionary capacity as something that was a key marker of their that set them apart for these norm-defying behaviors. The followers did. The followers said, you know what? The way the leader casts vision is really powerful. Now, the way that the leader did it was in two main ways, and this is what the followers said. Number one, they said that the leader lives the vision, that they actually embody the things that they want to call us up to be. And secondly, it was baked into the day in and day out conversations of their lives, right? So it wasn't the sage on the stage, right? It was actually the way they lived the vision and the way they baked it into the day-to-day aspects of their lives. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the values in more detail. So first of all, I want to talk to you about, just for a minute, about the prioritization and care for followers element. And again, it could be the one where you beat the dead horse, where you feel like, here we go again with putting others first. But here's the thing. There was a guy, his name is Subir Chowdhury. He's written a lot in Six Sigma, and he does a lot of consulting on quality and process improvement. And what he did was he started to notice the way that some of his clients would take his insights and they would get a five times return on their investment from what he did. And that's okay. That's a fair return. But other of his clients would get 100x return on their investment. And so he said, well, clearly, maybe it's that the consultants that he was discharging into these different locations were, one was he just licked the lollipop of mediocrity, and the other one was good. And they actually did the in-depth research, and what they found out was the caring mindset was the differentiator. It was actually that capacity for the people to feel cared for that really marked them. So I want you to listen to some of the ways that these positively deviant leaders talked about that value of caring for others. Here's what the Air Force General said. He said, it starts with the value of humanity, the value of other people. This value in the journey of humanity to find mutual respect and carve out the ability to love one another. That's probably the value that's most deeply motivational to me. For me, this is the empathy that really makes a difference to a person who contributes to their tapestry of relationships. Here's what the president said. This is the president of, again, one of the fastest growing privately held companies in the country. He said, first and foremost is a love for people, right? This is a much different mindset than, if you were in the session on millennials earlier, than work 2.0, right? Than that kind of boss command control leader. He says, I bring into my desire as a leader to show love to the people that I have received in my life. figuring out what it looks like for us as an organization to love and see the best in each other as people, and yet use that as a driving force to have a more successful organization where we hold each other to a higher accountability. That's been something I've had to work through along with other leaders here in the organization who reflect that same passion for seeing people who have inherent value. I'm going to go on to some of the follower perspectives. Okay, so the follower said this: I think his integrity is way above board. I think his care for people is beyond what others do. He actually does care about you. It's an interesting phrase. Next, he values other people. He values how people are feeling, and he values people with their careers. I think he looks at employees not necessarily as they're going to be here the rest of their life. I think it's more of, what can I do to help you with your career so that someday, if you do leave, you can take that and, make something better of it. So let me talk to you about a few practices about prioritizing and connecting with your followers. First of all, be interested before interesting. This is so simple. Paying attention to the people in front of you, unlocking them, finding out what matters to them will help you go further in your influence as a leader than I think so many things. Be interested before interesting. Number 2, call people up more than you call people out. This one's so fun. I've got 4 kids, so there's always crazy mayhem going on in our house. And I've brought this language into our family. So it was my 14-year-old. We were at the dinner table last week, and he's like, all right, I want to start calling people up in our family rather than calling people out. And he starts going around the table and calling people up. I'm like, boom, that's sweet, right? You want to call people up to what they can be instead of calling them out into what they're not. Such a simple practice. And so maybe you start in 2018. I'm going to do some call up times. I'm going to call people up on the team rather than calling people out. And number 3, level the ground, right? In every one of these leaders, there was a pushing down of authority to where information was. There was a pushing down of authority in a almost promiscuously generous way. How do I get this authority downward so that other people have the maximum engagement? So I'm going to talk to you for a minute about the second thing I want to focus on, which is this growth and reproduction mindset value. I'm going to talk for a minute on that. So these leaders had a desire to push things downward, not only to the person in front of them, but to the person that was going to be impacted there. And the place where that actually was birthed was in this place of actually going, how do I have a mindset of multiplication? How do I think? I always tell people system stands for anything that saves you stress, time, energy, and money, right? How do I have a systems mindset that allows me to cascade values and cascade practices beyond myself? So this idea of actually learning, and this idea of actually going, how can I be a person who has something to pass on to others was really important. The Air Force general said this. He said, I have a behavior where I read. Even though I'm not a natural reader, I read a lot, and I read a wide variety, from theologists, sociologists, behavioral scientists, biologists, astrophysicists, futurists, business, military. And I do it because it brings creativity, it brings courage, right? So this learning mindset led to creativity, which led to this spilling out, which led to this constant pushing downward in really unique ways into the lives of their people. Finally, in the last minute, I want to talk to you about the attitudes. What did we see in the attitudes of these leaders that stood out from that normal or negatively deviant leadership model? So from the leader's perspective, they had a positive attitude, right? Shocking. Even if they were very critical, one of the leaders said, I suffer from terminal positivity. I'm always thinking optimistically. I'm always picturing what's the preferred future that actually can be something that I can compel others into. They were marked by humility and an abundance mindset, that resources could be scarce, but resources can also be created. And the same thing again from the followers. They saw positivity, they saw humility, and they saw visionary leadership evidenced in the leader. They saw a courageous mindset, and they saw a graciousness in the leader. I want to give you one final thought, and I want to focus on positivity and positive energy. So it's really interesting that the affect when you have positive energy as a leader onto your followers. And there was research done on networks inside organizations. And if you think about three kinds of networks, an information network, an influence network, and an energy network. An information network is a network that says who gives information to whom, right? This would be, I've got some IT knowledge and I become at the hub of an information network. An influence network is who influences whom. Who has some type of influence, however that happens. That's an influence network. If I was on staff at the Harvard Business Review, I would be at the hub of an influence network, and probably people would listen to me just because I was in this influence hub. And an energy network is about who energizes whom and who is energized by whom. What the research says is this: if you are in an energy network, a positively energizing energy network, first of all, you're going to be a higher performer. In fact, your position in the energy network is 4 times the predictor of performance compared to an influence or information network. And high-performing organizations had 3 times more positive energy networks than low-performing organizations. So I think if I were to say one thing as we land our time is, what does it look like if you think about positive, negative, neutral, when you're making contributions to people around you, to cultivate a mindset that says, I'm going to be a life-giving leader, not just a neutral leader, but I'm going to find ways to actually call people up rather than call people out and be someone who actually applies this into my own space. So top performers spend 1 hour more per week on average reflecting on who they're becoming. So as we land our time, I think that'll be my final thought, is just to say this, is that as you head into 2018, make sure you carve out space to reflect on how you're practicing with consistency these kind of values, behaviors, and attitudes that'll help you achieve extraordinary results. Thanks for your time. I still tried to end somewhat on time. I skipped a lot.
I'd like to see some of the research you're citing.
believe it, yes. Tell me that you love me so. You didn't have to love me, mama. Let me go. Hey, hey, mama, what's the matter here? You didn't have to make me a total disgrace. You didn't have to leave me with that fear in my face. Hey, hey, mama, what's the matter here? That's alright. It's awful doggone good. Hey, hey, baby, why you treating me mean? Oh, oh, baby, why you treating me mean? You didn't have to crucify me like you did. You didn't have to tell me I was just your kid. Hey, mama, why'd you treat me mean? You didn't have to say you'd always be by my side. You didn't have to tell me you'd be my blushing bride. Hey, hey, mama, why you treat me mean? But that's alright, I know your sisters too. You didn't have to tell me that you love me so. You didn't have to leave me, mama, let me go. Hey, hey, mama, what is wrong with you? You didn't have to leave me like a total disgrace. You didn't have to leave me with that fear on my face. Hey, hey, mama, what is wrong with you? Oh, but that's alright. I'll be the same way too. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, man. Now, baby, you didn't have to crucify me like you did. You didn't have to tell me I was just your kid. Hey, hey, mama, what's the matter here? You didn't have to tell me you would be my own. You didn't have to tell me, baby, let me go. Hey, hey, mama, what is wrong with you? That's alright, I know you're a sister too. What's the matter with you?
Okay, good afternoon. We're going to get started here in just a couple minutes. How's everyone doing so far today? Outstanding? All right. Did you enjoy the food trucks? Yes? No? Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started with our speaker this afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce you today to Dr. Brian Williamson. Dr. Williamson is a partner at Giant Worldwide and is sought after by leaders of all levels, traveling nationally and internationally, consulting and communicating in a way that contributes to increased health and performance of teams. Dr. Williamson has a proven track record of helping individuals and teams increase their leadership skills, emotional intelligence, and self-awareness, resulting in a greater capacity, satisfaction, and effectiveness. His 20-plus years of leadership experiences include roles as founder, senior director, and guess what, y'all? He was 4 years as an active duty Marine. His unique research in the field of positive organizational scholarship will be released next year in his book, Norm-Defying Leadership, Science and Stories from Today's Top Performers. It's my pleasure to introduce to you today Dr. Brian Williamson.
The box. We had nothing. And so basically going over to Kadena and getting some Popeyes was like the highlight of my weekend when I wasn't doing other things that I shouldn't have been doing. But anyway, so thank you not only for serving. I am your father. Thank you not only for serving, but for Popeye's chicken. So here's the deal. I'm going to do three things with you. At least these are my intentions. First of all, I want to give you a little context, and I'm going to introduce a field of research called positive organizational scholarship, just to give you a little sense of where I'm coming from. I'm going to inspire you, secondly, because I'm going to give you an overview of my research findings on positively deviant leaders, and I'm going to challenge you at the end just to grapple with how does this impact your life, and hopefully invite you to really make norm-defying leadership very, very normal for those in the span of care that you're with. So let me introduce you, first of all, to the field of positive organizational scholarship. So my business partner and I were recently hired to do some research inside a company around why was it that employees that were working there for 2 years or less were leaving, right? They had really good retention, but that 2-year and under population, they were saying peace out, and they wanted to really know why. And so we were brought on to do that, and we discovered as we hypothesized that it was this supervisor-employee relationship that was the issue, right? People don't leave a job, they leave a boss, and that's at least one of the most common things that we see. So we're not surprised when we read that 70% of the global workforce is disengaged, but 51% of the management workforce is disengaged. So there's a lot of challenges at those levels. So last month, I handed some of the data to the 5 supervisors, in this case, that we were working with. And in this little report out was information from those that they managed around why it was that they were struggling. And it was line after line after line of just reflecting back a lack of basic, emotional intelligence, respect, basic, just showing up. I mean, they have 12-hour shifts, and people would say, boy, my supervisor checks in at the beginning, and then he checks out. I don't know where he goes. I can't find him or her, right? And they're gone. So I framed my first question very carefully when I handed this to him. I said, I want you to read through this, and what I want you to do is I want you to look through the eyes of someone else. So if this report was about someone else, another set of supervisors, what do you see here? How would you coach those particular individuals? Well, the first responder said this. He said, I think you would get the same results no matter where you went. So I think it'd be the same across the board. And so using my mad active listening skills, which are very intentional, not natural to me, I said to him this. I said, it sounds to me like what you're saying then is that a thriving, life-giving workplace culture doesn't exist. And he was quick but incisive in his response, and he said, yes, but it is the exception. Now, I'm from Jersey. I don't even fish, but that is called hook, line, and sinker. So I pulled them in. I said, here's the deal, guys. I said, will you commit over the next year to becoming the exception? Will you commit to breaking free from your transactional mindset and look at life from the right side of the bell curve with me? Will you learn a new set of patterns and practices that are going to help you bump from this negative, toxic culture to at least a normal place and even become the exception, become an outlier, a positively deviant workplace environment? So I just put two words together that you're not used to seeing, right? Positive deviance. So you're not used to hearing giant ant or Microsoft Works. I mean, there's lots of two words that don't go together. Positive deviance is really what we look at under the umbrella of positive organizational scholarship. We look at, this is really some research birthed out of the University of Michigan. We look at what are the things that really enable human flourishing, what are the things that enable thriving and exceptional results inside organizations. So it's not positive in terms of shiny, happy people holding hands, if you remember the song. It's positive in terms of human flourishing and exceptional results. And we look at what accounts for that. To state it another way, this is Louie and Lilo. All right, this is a little embarrassing. I have my puppies up here, but it's a good way to think about why we do what we do when we look at these positive, deviant examples. So my wife, she just went plumb mad when we got these dogs. With 3 times a year, she makes our family go to JCPenney and put on like the same jammies, like Christmas jammies or Easter jammies. It's horrible. But the dogs, I mean, she's done off the loony fringe. And she takes a lot of pictures. She'll put them on Facebook. And a couple weeks ago, someone said to her, how do you get your dogs to stay so still? I mean, that seemed pretty obvious to me. It's called a treat. Good girl, good boy, stay, right? And what's interesting is in a lot of research, there's been a lot of focus on, if you think of how we treat pets, it's like, bad girl, I'm going to hit you with a switch, or good dog, here's a treat. We do a lot on these sort of negative or deficit gaps, right? Here's some negative things. You're doing something bad, and we want to get you normal, or you're off to the left, and of results. We want to at least get you normalized, right? There's a lot on that, and as many as some people have said, 99% of psychology research, 90% of health science research is on that negative deviance or negative side to normal, right? How do we normalize? How do we find out what's going wrong and get it to normal? And you might say there's good reason for that, but the reality is there's been a limiting effect because of a lack of looking at what accounts for these exceptional results. What helps us to go, if we think economics, from unprofitable to profitable to generous? If we go to ethics, what helps us move from unethical not only to ethical but to benevolent, right? How do we do that? And so really we're looking at how do we actually account for those things. And there's lots of research, 20 plus years of research around, good quality research around how that happens. Now, why is that important? Why was I attracted to this? Let me just give you 2 things, and then we'll dive in. First of all, and this is tweetable, if you lick the lollipop of mediocrity, you will suck forever, right? So here's the thing. Not one that's like, wah, wah, wah. All right, not one person in this room wants to be mediocre. And so why wouldn't you want to learn from positively deviant, norm-defying leaders and organizations? Like, it unleashes something called the heliotropic effect, right? And so the heliotropic effect is you put a plant in a window and it gravitates toward the light, right? In these positive leaders and positive organizations, there's a gravitational pull to the right of the bell curve. It's actually saying people are attracted to that. We want to go above and beyond. And simply stated, I mean, you look at all this research, and there's amazing connections between all of these constellation of behaviors and things like productivity and quality and mental acuity. I mean, people are just smarter. If you speak positivity into their life, they're smarter. right? Their brain's functioning with less fog and less distortion. And so it's really, really powerful to do that. Secondly, there's a lot of talk around here about the VUCA world. I'm more interested in the TGIF world. Twitter, Google, iPhone, Facebook, right? So we're in this digital world, right, where technology has sped things up so much. It's almost that the analogy used to be the Harley Davidson, get out on the highway, right? And someone said that the best metaphor for how we are experiencing life now is the tire spin. It's life at the speed of blur, right? And so actually so much has sped up. I mean, if you even think about pharma, like it used to take, 10 years and then 1 year to reproduce. If a drug came out on the market, for them to reproduce that, it's like an hour now. They scan it and boom, you can actually, things have sped up so much. But one thing that hasn't sped up is actually the time and the intentionality that it takes to function as a high-performing team, to actually oil the wheels, if you will, of really getting deep-level synergy and team enhancement. So actually, learning from people who are doing this very, very well, anything we can help us to really become better and better, and certainly even more efficient and effective on the people side is really important. So let me move into now just inspiring you a little bit with an overview of my research findings. We're not going to get to go in super detail on every element, of course, in 45 minutes, but we're going to talk about a little bit of what I learned from these positively deviant leaders, these norm-defying leaders. Now, we're going to see, we're going to date you in a minute here. How many of you remember Stretch Armstrong? We got some people in the room? Okay. All right, so when I was like in 5th grade, I got Stretch Armstrong as a gift. He was awesome. If you don't know what he is, you just pull him apart and he stretches and stretches. It's the bomb. Now, he lasted about 2 months in my house because what I did was I took an X-Acto knife and I gutted him. I mean, I sliced that thing right open and I have zero regrets. Like the red corn syrupy fluid that just came oozing out of him. I mean, it was awesome. I have no regrets to this day. I have issues probably, and some psychologist is going to talk to me afterwards. But the fact is, I gutted them, and I loved it. So when I decided to do my research, I said, I want to gut these positively deviant leaders. What is it? What's that inside story in a leader's life that enables them to be positively deviant and to be a norm-defying leader? So that's what I looked at. We define positively deviant leaders or positive deviance when we look at leaders like this. We say uncommon behavior, right, that doesn't conform to expected norms, but it would be deemed positive by a referent group of followers. Okay, that's a bit of a picture of what we're talking about when we look at positive deviance in leaders. Now, the leaders that I looked at, let me just give you an overview, and we're just going to listen in on some of the work that I did with the followers and with the leaders themselves. Right, so I had 2 presidents of organizations. One was the president of an organization that was recognized by Inc. magazine as one of the fastest growing privately held companies in the country. They had 133% growth rate in the span of time that they looked at. The other president was a president of a $4 billion manufacturing company who, as I described this idea of positive deviance to one of the executives that worked with him, they said, he is totally that. He is this positive rule breaker. You've got to really understand what's making him tick. One was a dentist who was, she was actually placed in the top 12 female dentists in the country. Her practice was recognized as the prototype of the dental practice of the future, and she was actually a top disruptor in her field. Fascinating person. A serial entrepreneur, an Air Force general who, in addition to a myriad of other amazing things, saved 12 Marines in the Kunar Valley by demonstrating some norm-defying behaviors, such as flexing some airspace regulations and refueling regulations, but we'll keep that between you and I. Amazing to learn what caused him to tick. And a restaurant owner. Now, this was amazing. There's a restaurant in San Francisco, and the story was featured on CNN News. And, I mean, you watch it, and instantly you know this is an outlier organization and really started to tap into, is this a positively deviant leader? Her profits are 4 times higher than other successful San Francisco restaurants. Her dishwasher, Miguel, has been there for 26 years, right? Pretty amazing. Now, they used to have this thing, they've since changed it, but they used to have a thing where they said the $1.25 per person surcharge added to all the checks provides full benefits for our hardworking staff. The extra charge provides 32 employees of the San Francisco French Bistro with full health and dental insurance and paid sick leave. No employee is exempt, even those who work only for 1 day a week. She was absolutely fascinating. She talked about going to the Golden Gate Restaurateurs little event that they had, the little convention. And she would tell people, because of course, I mean, if you're around somebody, it's like you're getting 4 times return in your industry. That's like, all right, I'm going to learn from that side of the bell curve. So she would describe the kinds of things we're going to look at in a minute here, the values, the behaviors, the attitudes. She would describe how she's living. And guess what? They wouldn't do it. She said not one person ever followed through. Like, she would once in a blue moon get hired as a consultant to try to help raise the average game to Norm-Defying. But none of them would do it, right? Because there's a conventional mental map that people get locked in. It's a mindset of transaction that leads to compliance. And it ends up with this really sketchy, unhealthy workplace environment, right? And they're so locked in that even if you could see this amazing opportunity to go to the next level and be norm-defying, they won't do it. Fascinating. So I gave the followers the definition. I said, here's what a positively deviant leader is. We looked at that, the uncommon behavior. And I asked them, I said, is your leader a positive deviant? And if so, why? So I just want you to take this in with me for a minute, okay? Take in what the followers said were these behaviors. So here's the first one, the ability to let you lead. A lot of leaders in those positions try to micromanage and don't allow for failure in different aspects. And to be able to speak into that, the challenge that what you did yesterday isn't good enough for today either. The expectation that you have to build into other leaders. You don't get to just sit and soak it up. You have to push it into others. So I don't think that's a typical approach by leaders in the world. The next one said this. One of the best things about Jason is he does have a different way of thinking about things that goes outside the norm. I have seen in him. It's almost like a generosity for customers, or even if the customer is, let's say, not paying the bills, and contractually we have the right to go back and not pay for repair on a piece of equipment, we would still go make the repair for them, and we would risk losing a significant amount of money in the hopes that it is a sign that we can rebuild the relationship and have it long term. To start with, this is another follower of a different leader. She, from the beginning, has really focused on putting the team aspect above most things. So she's centered around the team to build a strong team that would then care for her patients rather than put the patients first. So it's kind of like a backwards way of putting patients first. So put us first, strengthen us, so that we can better care for her patients, so that it's not just her at a top-down model. So she doesn't get to make all the decisions. She builds us up and strengthens us to help make decisions. Last one here. Well, the first thing I'd say is that she's not top-down. She doesn't have a top-down management style. Her management style is more of a shared leadership style. And you don't see that in a lot of organizations. She doesn't like to call herself the boss. She kind of hates that word, and she has like a shared leadership amongst her practice. So I think that really sets her apart and puts her above. Now, let me just give you a couple thoughts on this. First of all, you guys remember in the 80s there was this song, I Always Feel Like Somebody's Watching Me? You remember that? Don't make me sing it. All right. So it was really fascinating to watch these followers describe with an incredible amount of detail what it was like to be on the other side of these leaders. People in your charge are watching you more. Like that song, I always thought it was real freaky. I always feel like somebody. It's freaky. Like, it's freaky how much people in your charge are watching you. So my question as you lean into 2018, what's it like to be on the other side of you? How do people experience your leadership? And finding that out, mining out that kind of data is valuable. And there's some really practical ways you can do that. I'd be glad to talk afterwards about doing that. The other thing is, I probably wouldn't say this to every audience, but as you look at that, you say, boy, norm-defying leaders. And you said, Brian, these are uncommon behaviors. That seems pretty common. And I'd say, good. you're probably a positively deviant leader. It's probably the air you're swimming in, the water you're swimming in, and it's very familiar. You're going to find, I hope in a way, that this underwhelms you, right? Probably no speaker would say, I hope you're about to be underwhelmed by what I show you when I gut these positively deviant leaders, like the red corn syrup ooze. I hope you're like, well, that's pretty obvious. Well, that would be good, right? Now, with that, I will challenge you and say this. There was research done of 20,000 plus executives, and those 20,000 plus executives, 70% of them thought they were in the top 10%. Hashtag disconnect, right? So there's probably some things you're going to learn here as we go through this. So we're going to look at three categories. As we gutted these positively deviant, norm-defying leaders, we're going to look at values, behaviors, and attitudes. Okay, we're just going to overview them and get a little bit of a taste of what was that inside story, right? What was it that actually causes these exceptional results? Okay, here's the list of values. Now, I'm going to just talk through these briefly, and we'll look at the behaviors then. So you have the prioritization and care for others. That was by far the weightiest, most significant thing that popped out. My leader is somebody who definitely values people. We'll dig into that in a minute as well. They were values driven. One of the leaders said this: when values are clear, decisions are easy. Right? So all of you next gen leaders that are listening, you have to figure out what your values are. Now, the Air Force provides a great set of values for you to latch onto that you're going to be called up to live into, and those are important. But you have to know what are the values that you operate out of. And so if you struggle, you're a little indecisive, finding out what your values are going to make decisions a lot easier. And to get that out into that external world, I think is going to help you go further faster. So these leaders were values driven. They had a growth and reproduction mindset. They pushed things down into the lives of those they were leading. And what was fascinating about this is they were not just concerned about the person in front of them. They were concerned about the person in front, in front of the person in front of them. They all of them had this, most of them had this mindset of, right, there's this thing that says you're not a leader if you have followers. You're a leader if you leave in your wake other leaders, okay? They had that in their mindset. I not only want to develop the person in front of me, I want to reproduce. I want to have a mindset of multiplication that allows this person to have to push this down to the next person. Very different than what you'd think. With our emphasis on development, they had an emphasis on the second, third, and fourth generations. They were driven by a sense of meaning. So they could all throw a grappling hook up to either their religious faith or yoga or some type of early life experience that they had, as General Quast talked about this morning, something that marked them where they could say, I do what I do. This is my anchoring thing that I throw my grappling hook into, and this just gives me life. This is my driving purpose, if you will. Right? So there's a lot of talk about, like, do what you're passionate about. And I don't really agree with that all the time. I think if you find your purpose, you'll be passionate. So some of you are looking for like, what am I passionate about? Find out what your purpose is, what you're wired up for, what you're inclined toward, and passion will flow from that. So these leaders had a passion that resulted from this sense of meaning in their life. They were marked by courageous action. They would, all of them, and this was interesting, they would run towards conflict. Right? Some of them would say, I thrive on that, like the general this morning. Hey, I'm not scared of conflict. I'm going to hightail it right into conflict. Some of them said that, and other ones said, you know what? I don't like it. I feel vulnerable, but I'm going to go and deal with conflict. Right? That was an example of how courage played out. They all had a shared approach to leadership. They were pushing things down. How do we share this with other people? Pushing authority to where information is. And this one's interesting. So the leaders valued emotional intelligence, right? How can I make sure I understand my own emotional state, lead myself, and really connect with people around me? And in terms of a value, the followers actually didn't call that one out. But what they did, and I think this is interesting, they actually said that the leader had integrity, right? And we'll come back to that when we look make some comments here on both values and behaviors. So that was the value set, right? Here were the behaviors, and I'll throw these up here, and it's going to look very familiar. And that would be a good thing, because these leaders said, I value these things. These things are precious to me. If you go back to Lord of the Rings, right? These are my precious, right? And they behaved in ways that were consistent with that, right? So almost all of the list is the same. I won't detail it out, but there was actually the interesting, the followers perceived in the leader, they said about the leader, that person is always learning. They had a learning and improvement mindset. They're always popcorning out some new idea, something that they've picked up, and they're always learning. The leader said it as this, like, I want to grow. I know that I need to grow. I need to be on the receiving end of some good information, so I need a growth and reproduction mindset. And again, we're going to get into a couple of these in a minute. Creativity, the leader said that was very important for them. And you'll notice the vision one, which was a surprise to me, that the leader didn't actually say vision was casting vision was something that marked them differently, but the followers did notice that in the leaders. So let me make a few practical observations, and hopefully something that you can kind of sink your teeth into as you launch into this year. So again, this idea of practiced values versus preferred values, right? There's things that we would say that we value, but we're not practicing them. I call those preferred values. So I might say, well, I value physical fitness, but if I only go to the gym once a month and I don't watch my diet, that's a preferred value. It's not a practiced value. Positively deviant leaders, there was a congruence between what they said they valued and how they behaved, as well as what the followers saw in these exceptional leaders. Fascinating, because when I work with average or low performing leaders, there's a big disconnect between how they see themselves and how others see them. You'll often say, oh, I'm great, I'm a great leader, and then we do a little 360, and then boom, they get clocked upside the head with the velvet brick wrapped around the brick. Boom, here's this 360 result that shocks you, because what it's like to be on the other side of you is not what you think it is, right? But not the case. There was very much consistency there. Secondly, the way that these leaders prioritized, you'll notice they said that they valued prioritizing and caring for their followers. The way they behaved was by making time for them, right? They connected with them. The behavior that they engaged in was, I'm actually going to take time from going at the speed of blur, and I'm actually going to give them proximity and frequency appropriately, right? I'm going to give the needed time to my followers. And for this one, I have zero doubt that this is a pain point for most everyone in this room. To actually slow down and give whoever it is that's in your span of care the appropriate time to elevate their capacity, to give them clarity, whatever the case is, so valuable, and something that these leaders did, that they found a way to do it, and I think that's really powerful. Finally, the talking about vision from a stage is overrated. That was a takeaway from my research. It was the followers said that the leaders were visionary, and the leaders actually didn't bring that up. They didn't say, my great vision casting ability is why I'm exceptional. It's not that they didn't value doing that, but what the followers said was really intriguing to me, because they said two things about vision. Number one, the leaders lived the vision. They modeled the vision more than they talked about the vision. So they were actually a living, breathing picture of what the preferred future was. And secondly, not only did they live that, but they baked vision casting into the day-to-day conversation of their world. So there was old school leadership thinking about vision. You need to cast a vision, red hot vision once a month. And I think actually it's probably best to just, for you all to think, how do I vision cast consistently and continually all the time in my day in and day out conversations? So that's a little bit of a picture of what does it look like to get a snapshot of the values and the behaviors of these particular leaders. I'm going to drill into two of them just really briefly. I want to talk to you about the prioritization and care for others, and then this growth and reproduction mindset. So the prioritization and care for people and connecting with people, this was the weightiest thing for them. And I will just say this, because it feels probably like beating a dead horse at LEDx today when you talk about the need to care for and prioritize your followers. But I'll say this. There was a guy, his name's Subir Chowdhury, and he is an expert in Six Sigma, if you're familiar with that. He does a lot of consulting on quality and process improvement. And he saw something interesting. He saw that some of his clients got a 5 times return on the investment that they made, and others of his clients got a 100-time return on the investment. So Subir was looking at this, and he said, well, maybe I had somebody over here, the 5 times return was, which is still good, but he said maybe that person was sucking the lollipop of mediocrity, right? Maybe the consultant that he had on that project was not doing well. And, and maybe this one's a rock star consultant, and that accounts for it. So they did the research. And what they noticed was the difference in those two organizations was simply that caring mindset that the leader had towards their follower. So just give you a picture. This is the Air Force General describing his own value of this in practice. He said it starts with the value of humanity, the value of other people, this value in the journey of humanity to find mutual respect and carve out the ability to love one another. All right? If you were in Andy's sessions, this is workplace 3.0 stuff here. Right? That's probably the value that is most deeply motivational to me. You know, for me, it is that empathy that really makes a difference in a person who contributes to their tapestry of relationships. I won't read this whole thing, but one of the presidents of the fast company, high growth company, said this: first and foremost, it's a love for people. So he said the thing that enabled his exceptional performance was love for people. He said, I bring into my desire as a leader to show love to the people I've received in my life. That's as far as I want to go. But I want to say this, you can't give to others what you don't possess. And there was a real stewardship orientation. Each of these leaders felt they were entrusted with something. In this case, this leader was talking about love. He felt like he had received so much, and he wanted to express that. And each and every one of us in this room has received so much, and it's a good way to become this caring mindset person is to go, how do I make sure that I'm receiving everything I need so that I'm spilling it over? How can I look back on my story and actually get to a place where I'm actually stewarding the goodness and the generosity that I've been given? So some practices about prioritizing and caring for other people. Here's the first one. Real just simple little practical nuggets for you. Be interested before interesting. Right? This is something that's helped me because I told you before, I'm real critical versus positive by nature. I'm also real selfish. I like to talk about myself. And I can actually tell you that this phrase alone, just being interested in other people before being interesting, right? When somebody tire kicks my life, I'm happy to just talk and talk and talk. But this discipline of going, hey, I'm going to actually find out what is it that matters to this person? How do I get to understand what's important to them, what motivates them, is a huge game changer for how do you prioritize and care for people. Secondly, call people up more than you call people out. Now, this is a fun one because my son, we've got 4 kids. He's 14, my younger son. And this is really taken in our family where he walks around the house, and we were at the dinner table last week, and he's like, all right, man, I'm going to call some of you up instead of calling you out. And he starts going around and being like, Abby, you're this, you're great, you're doing really good, and Micah, boom. He's like calling people up, right? And we got a lot of calling out going on. And I know sarcasm is sort of the language of the day for a lot of people. We call people out. I would encourage you to actually go create a culture where you call people up to their potential, see things in them about who they are, and call them up to what they could be. Makes a huge impact. And then finally, level the ground. It was interesting that these leaders, I think they all valued appropriately demystifying their positional power and actually pushing that downward as much as possible, leveling the ground, making sure that there was that collaboration and that relationship that could take place. Real quick thought, I want to talk about this creativity value. Growth and reproduction mindset. So these leaders were learners. I love the Air Force General said, I have this discipline of reading. He said, I actually, even though I'm not a natural leader, I read a lot. I read theologists, sociologists, behavioral scientists, biologists, astrophysicists, futurists, business, military, and I do it because it brings creativity. It gives me the courage. It was interesting, like lifelong learning, this growth mindset was the thing that birthed for him courage and birthed creativity and helped him to go beyond the status quo. This other leader said this, creativity has just been my best friend always. And like there's got to be a better way. I'll wake up at 4 in the morning and say I have an idea, and I'll begin to describe it, and people are like, what? And the more we talk about it, the more it comes to mind. It's not like I have this creative idea and I have the whole answer. I've got a creative idea, and I'm like, what do you think? So I thought it was interesting. When you talk about being a reproducing leader, continuous learning and your commitment to that as a leader, it births creativity, which mandates collaboration, right? You can't be creative in isolation, but you're learning these things, and you spill out, you kick it out, and it really facilitates shared leadership, which I think produces norm-defying teams and organizations. So this whole cycle of how do I have a mindset of multiplication? How do I push downward? And how do I really create this incredible place of exceptional results? Creativity is one of those important values that comes from continuous learning. So as you step into 2018, where do you feel like you're lacking courage? Where do you feel like you're stunted creatively? And maybe you just need to find that mentor, find that book, find that resource to help you just get some things in that can flow out of you just very, very naturally. The dental practice, which the quote I just read about creativity has been my best friend, I told you earlier, they were picked as the prototype dentist of the future. It's about 2 miles from my house. And one of the things that came out of just her idea that she had was how do I really, how do we help the next generation to grow up to be healthy, thriving young adults that take care of themselves? And so in their practice, they started the Children's Hands-On Learning Lab. And she said, what we're doing is that we wanted kids to care for themselves. And so they basically sprayed this stuff on the kid's teeth that showed the plaque, and the kid does the cleaning his or herself. And the dental hygienist, which my wife is one of them, by the way, not in this practice, but in a different one, but the dental hygienists had their worlds rocked because that's what they went to school for. They wanted a day in, day out job. I just want to come in and scrape your teeth and talk to you, and here you go. Right? I mean, that's something you sign up for. You didn't sign up for, all right, Toby, let me spray this on your teeth. Now get after it. You missed the plaque on number 14. Right? It totally rocked the world. But this was something that was birthed out of her creative genius that led to collaboration, that led to this entirely different way of doing things. Very, very powerful. This is the kind of stuff that happens when you simply say, I'm going to keep getting after it as a leader. Finally, attitudes. Okay, what attitudes did we see in these leaders? And what we find, of course, leaders create culture. So if we're talking about positive deviance, we're going to think that, boy, these leaders must have had a positive attitude, and they sure did. It didn't mean that they were critical, but they had a positive attitude. One of them said, I suffer from terminal positivity, right? They were constantly looking at how do we, there's got to be a hopeful, optimistic way to look at this, and how do I call people up, and how do I really think about this positively? They had humility, right? And you notice courage, right? Courage and humility. You think, how do you have courage and humility? I really appreciate, there's a guy named Charlie Kim. He's the CEO of Nextjump. And he puts these two words together, these two words of humble confidence. And he says, humility without confidence is insecurity, and confidence without humility is arrogance. So these qualities of humble confidence, this tension of actually being both humble and confident, were present. And it's a really, really important quality. There's a way to do it where humility doesn't mean that you diminish your own skills and capacity and gifts. There's a way to be humble and confident, which is what they were. And finally, abundance. They had an abundance mindset where you think some leaders, you hit a wall and you go, I don't know what to do here. I've come up against the end. They're always thinking there's got to be more. Resources aren't scarce. They can be created. How do we have an abundance mindset? And the followers actually saw the positivity. They saw the humility. Once again, the leaders didn't credit visionary capacity or visionary attitude as something that was important for them, but the followers did actually say that, again, here's this visionary leader that has this amazing, attractive, compelling vision of the future that I want to be part of. As well, they were courageous and gratitude. And I do think, those of you that you think, we had a lot of talk about humility over the last day here. And I really think the path to humility is crossed over the bridge of gratitude. So if you want to grow in humility, be thankful. I mean, do thankfulness journals. I mean, it's amazing, even the research done on being thankful and what that produces in your mindset, and just being thankful and grateful, you'll find yourself getting to another level. Let me just land with a couple things. I want to talk about the positivity attitude and the power of positive energy. So there's research done about positive energy. Are you a life-giving or life-depleting leader, or are you just neutral? So when I bump into you, am I going to get energy from you, or is it just going to be like blah, or are you going to suck life from me, right? I quit a job from a guy who sucked life from me, right? I don't like that. And nobody got time for that, right? So I want to be a life-giving leader. So Kim Cameron has done some research on networks inside organizations. And there's 3 kinds of networks. There's maybe 50 kinds, but he looked at 3 kinds of networks: an information network, an influence network, and an energy network. An information network is who gives information to whom, right? So if you're at the hub of an information network inside an organization where your department has lots of data that other people need, that's a competitive advantage. If you're at the hub of an influence network, and this is who influences whom and who is influenced by whom, this would maybe be an example. If I took a job at Harvard Business Review and I was writing articles, people are probably going to just listen to me because I work for the Harvard Business Review and I write articles. I have a competitive advantage because there's an assumption that I was vetted by Harvard and I have something good to say. Okay, that's an influence network. And inside a team or organization, you could see people influence each other different ways. And then there's energy networks. Who energizes whom and who is energized by whom? It's that positive energy thing. Now, the research done on this is amazing. First of all, those who positively energize others, just straight up, they're higher performers. If you are a positive energizer, you're performing better. If you've got a seat in the positive energy network inside your organization, that's 4 times the predictor of performance compared with your position in an influence or information network. So just think about, there are thousands of books. Like, there's over 200,000 books on Amazon and 1,000 a month being added around leadership. And so much you'll read, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And here we have positive energy is 4 times the predictor of performance than influence, right? Leadership is vastly complex, and yeah, there's some important things we can learn about it. But being a positive energizer and learning to do that is very, very important. And finally, high-performing organizations had 3 times as many positive energy networks than low-performing. So it's so important that you actually go, how could I become a positive energizer? I mean, I could tell you for me, I get to some places where I take on so much, I can do it. I was a Marine, nothing's going to stop me, so I'll say yes to everything, and I'll just suck it up and do it. And I'll get to places where I'll be overwhelmed, and I'll start to retreat to my internal world, and I'll get these toxic emotions. So I've found ways in knowing myself and my own personality wiring to get to a positive state again. I've found ways to lead myself to be much more getting back from negative to neutral to positive, that I think for you to think about this year. Are you a positive energizer, and how would you become that positive energizer? Take a journey there. So finally, I'm just going to have you grapple, just a final thought. This year, I want you to think about, how does this apply to you, just personally and organizationally, becoming a positively deviant, norm-defying leader? What would it look like for you this year to actually go, okay, maybe I'm functioning average and above average sometimes, but to make that journey of committing to that. First of all, I just want to say this, is that top performers spend an average of 1 hour per more each week reflecting on who they're becoming. They spend 1 hour or more each week reflecting on who are they becoming, right? Who am I? Who am I becoming? And so for you this year to actually carve out space for self-leadership, there's so much talk about leading your team, leading an organization, whatever that looks like for you, those in your command. Leading yourself, it all starts with knowing yourself to lead yourself. Becoming a person who says, I'm actually going to spend time on what's the trajectory of my life, and who are the people that I need to connect with and wire and interface with in order to become the person that I'm wired up to be. And final thought is this: if you think of a pendulum, and I'm not doing no weird last-minute hypnotize you thing, but if you think of a pendulum of work and rest, we're actually wired up to work from rest, not just rest from work, right? We're actually wired up to be in a rhythm where we rest and we swing out to do our work. To rest and almost this year, when you step in to actually go, how do I receive? Make sure I'm receiving enough to have stuff to spill out. Take time for yourself to actually go, I need to work from rest, not just rest from work. I need to be someone who models, the values that I want, that behaves in a norm-defying way, and you'll be a game changer. You will see exceptional results as you begin to put some of this into practice. So thanks for your time. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and make norm-defying leadership normal. Cheers.